I am thrilled to have this program launch the spring section of the Executive in Residence program for the Trachtenberg School. I'm really extraordinarily grateful to our three executive in residences to take some time today to share their insights around maintaining hope as a leader. In the fall, they had all been meeting with a lot of our students and alumni, and they'll be doing that again in the spring. And in a minute, I'll put that in the chat for all of our attendees so you can sign up for them with the spring. But we wanted to start this spring with kind of bringing them together. They've all never met together and hearing some insights on a topic that we think is incredibly timely. So I've shared with them each four questions we're going to go around and have some responses to today. If there is an opportunity at the end to open up a Q&A, we will do that. Otherwise, we will try to stay to the half an hour. So the first question to start today, this morning, or this afternoon now with is, how do you personally define hope in a professional context, and how does that differ from optimism? And how do you ensure that this hope is grounded in this data and reality versus the wishful kind of optimistic just thinking? So Nish, you were first on my screen, so I'm going to start with you.
Great. Thank you, Denise. And hello, everyone. So I think I've my whole career has been around hope and the hope that you can make the world a better place. I spend most of my time focused on innovation and working with entrepreneurs. And by definition, innovation is about hope. It's a new idea, a new technology, a new way of doing things, and it's people essentially looking at how to make the world a better place, whether it's a corporate product or it's AI or it's climate change. They're trying to use innovation to make the world a better place. And so I think I've always been in that space. And I think two examples I've give of hope in the professional context that really drives me. One was a school lunch program in India that I've been involved with for about 20 years that I helped start in the United States that feeds 2.5 million kids a day in India. That's about 500 million meals a day they cook. And that's an example of something that was small. It was one kitchen and that scaled incredibly large and is now really addressing a policy challenge in India. And so that the fact that they could do that makes me hopeful. And then the other experience that we all went through, I think that makes me hopeful, professionally was, watching the response to COVID and particularly the vaccine. And if you think about innovation, the COVID vaccine came about, and most of us were somewhat back to normal within a year and a half of the outbreak. And so, when we put our minds to it with innovation, with new models, I think professionally we can, certainly make the world a better place, operate more effectively. And I think the key is to keep looking for those things and to look at the data, look at what's working, what isn't, and put it all together, and then keep plowing forward.
Fantastic. I'm going to move over the screen to Clark.
Oh, I was hoping Rosa would be next on your screen. Nish, that was such a good answer, but it's a hard question, right? I think one, being realistic that the work that we do, I'm in the public sector and have been for my most of my career with some stints in the private sector, but it's hard work that we do, and depending on the level of government you work in, it can take a really, really long time to feel like you're making a difference or to move the ball down the field. So. One, little wins are important in this world. I imagine Nish, when we spun up that program in India, it just didn't happen overnight. And there's along the way there's certain benchmarks that you need to you need to take pride in. That's kind of number one. Number two, there's this. I always talk with my staff about this old movie, Shawshank Redemption. And at the end of the movie, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but end of the movie, they're talking about how the individual in the movie broke out of this prison over many years, and he was really into geology, so the study of rocks, and he said that's all it takes is time and pressure, that and a big poster because he put the poster on the wall of his prison cell, which is what he covered up the hole that he was digging out in. And I was the governor's chief of staff in Virginia for 8 years. I run the Council of Governments now and represent the 24 local governments in and around the district. And what I have found is that if you have a good idea and you apply enough time and pressure and build the support for it, while there may not be an opening, at this juncture to move forward with that policy, I think back to Donna Infeld's class, the policy streams at some point they will intersect. and something will happen that will provide you an opportunity to move that issue forward. And if you haven't built the case for it, and you don't have the facts and the data to support it, and have not been building kind of a diversity of support along the way, you won't be ready to make the most of that moment. So hope is I think it is needs to be grounded in facts and making a strong case, but understanding that sometimes public policy, it takes time and pressure, and then it takes some kind of opening that you can't necessarily predict right now, and you need to be ready when that moment comes. So.
Fantastic. And Rosa.
Yeah, it's nice to meet my peers and hear what they're about. And thank you for everyone who's joined. I think I've been in the philanthropic space for maybe 15 years. That means in major philanthropic organizations working across a number of issue areas, but generally focused on economic opportunity and social justice issues and racial equity. Inherent in that work is both hope and despair, right? And where I draw my hope is you receive as a philanthropist, you are the recipient of innovative ideas from change makers across the country, in all 50 states, from all different backgrounds. And they gift you with their best shot at here's how we can make it's about social change. So I don't know that is where I draw my hope from, is the relationship with change makers and the ideas that change makers bring to you from folks that are driven and are either working at the local community or working at the state level or have a national level vision. So for me, I can't but receive this hopefulness and not incorporate it and have it feed my own sense of hope. But how is it grounded in reality and data? How do I ground it? That's tough. You have to. It is very tough times. I mean, the reason that we're having this conversation about hope is because a lot of people are feeling drained, taxed. There's what we're living through in our country now is division, and that can feed despair, and hopelessness, and a sense of I don't matter. And I think that's for me. That's it. I love and appreciate the offering to the students of a conversation around hope, especially when you're young and launching into the world as it is today, the market as it is today, the economy as it is today, the political, situation that we find ourselves in, which we can name, for me, hope is action. It's not optimism. You mentioned the word optimism. Optimism is, I'm not grounded in optimism. I'm grounded in hope, and hope is built on action and pressure and force and people and relationships and connection, and strategy if you don't have the right strategy. So I'm constantly revising philanthropic strategy for what don't I understand about the context, because when you make a philanthropic investment, it's about fomenting change in some kind of way. So you are making a bet on an individual or an organization that they're going to be a part of a change maker, to have an echo effect, to have some kind of impact. So these guys said names different things. I'm going to name people and change makers from across the country that just drop all their hopes on you and say, can you give us resources to move this kind of agenda? And I can't but be the recipient of that and not also hold their hope. Sometimes hold their despair and know how hard it is. But that's who I get inspired by.
Okay, this is great. Now we're going to dig a little bit deeper in that. Can you just share a specific moment in your career when you felt your hope wavered? And how did you recalibrate? And for this one, Rosa, since you're unmuted now, I'm going to start with you and then move my way backwards on my screen.
When you asked me that question, I'm going through it right now. When you feel your hope waver, who knew? Who could have known and foreseen the national political challenges right now? Some people did, I didn't. I'm going to introduce that there are democratic norms, constitution-based democratic norms, the foundation around which, whether you're in business, you are in philanthropy, you are in, run a small business, whatever you're in the nonprofit space, we are in a very different environment now where some norms, democratic norms and ways of moving and what we can rely on from government, are all shocking us, are all up in the air. So for me, I would say this is a moment that's going to test all of our character. This is a moment that's going to test our commitment. This is a moment that's going to test us individually as well as collectively. What was the question? I think that, you asked a question around a moment when that hope was challenged. I will say specifically that the seeing these democratic norms and standards and processes shaken, and seeing people weak at the knees, and as they, the people who are sliding into authoritarianism say, obeying in advance, and the amount of obeying in advance that there is in philanthropy, the curtailing work around racial equity in the philanthropic space, curtailing basic work that did not used to be partisan at all. That will shake you and say, what world am I operating in? But what I thought to myself was, when I see this, when I operate in this, when I saw this, when certain political leaders, but when the president was elected, I thought to myself, what am I not understanding then? It's about me. I need to recalibrate my understanding. There are things that I don't understand about this country. There are things that I don't understand about the forces at play. There are things that I don't understand about people's level of despair. There's things that I don't understand about economic insecurity that is driving this. There are things that I don't understand about the digital space and how it is affecting people's lives that I need to come to understand so that I feel more empowered in how I go about this work. But for me, the shaking of the hope is to see people fall, to see, a slide into authoritarianism, or and that is that's very despairing. But I try to refine my understanding and think, like, what don't I understand that I need to better understand about this country's history? And then you realize, oh, okay, these forces are historical. So I don't want to go too far into it, but I will say that I'm in that moment, and we've been in that moment where I'm an immigrant. I came to the US because of, love of capitalism, inside a democratic government, and to see that be made vulnerable as an immigrant, I think, oh, okay, my parents didn't come here for this, but now we're facing this where we are. So I need to understand, what do we need to know and understand about our country and our society that got us here, And so how can I make investments in new and different strategies that can help get us through this?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Clark, I see you're unmuted, so I'm going to go over right to you.
Sure. Well, I mean, one, I agree with Rosa talking about just the importance of this call and this topic, and being recognizing that it's an important topic for folks to come online and chat about. So, I mean, one, when you kind of leave GW and enter the professional space, and our leader, one, always continuing to talk and recognize your feelings, and the fact that we all need folks to talk to, I think is healthy, right? So, like, I think I avoided for a long time sitting down with like a therapist to talk about what I was going through and getting feedback. And I got to tell you, that's like super healthy because no one kind of has the answer in terms of being hopeful every day, right? And being able to talk to somebody about kind of what you're going through, and the pressure that you have, trying to also uplift everyone around you at the same time, is a challenge. That's a lot. That's kind of number one. One of the things that we did, both in Virginia at the Commonwealth level and then at COG, was kind of look how we were providing for employees. So when we came in the first 6 months of the administration that I served in, we didn't have a family medical leave policy on the books. We put one in place, 8 weeks, 100% pay. When you add your 4 weeks of federal pay, that's 12 weeks, 100% pay. If you have a child or adopt or foster a child, we stood up. We didn't have a nursing room anywhere in a state building. There's one in every building. We didn't have a bike rack anywhere. There's bike racks. We didn't have a 529 contribution program. We didn't have a loan repayment program. We had talked a long time about pay inequities between people that look like me and folks that don't look like me. And shocking, most governors weren't willing to actually look at what we paid state employees and change the pay scales. We did that. So I think one, around the topic of hope, is making sure you take care of yourself and take care of those around you. We changed our leave policy at COG. For your sick policy, you can take your own kind of mental health day, no questions asked. You don't have to articulate why you're doing that. People need to be able to take a few hours off or a day off and just breathe, right? So that's important. I will say a couple times in my career where my hope was challenged. One, I left the DC area for 12 years to go down to Richmond and work at the state level. I got pretty frustrated working at the federal level with the pace and the inability to get things done. Around the time of COVID, the administration that I was leading had gone through a lot with the governor I worked for, and COVID at the start was one of those times. The governor at the time was the only physician in the country when COVID hit, and so there was this added expectation that he would somehow figure out and solve COVID. And you couldn't make a decision. Every decision you made related to how to address the spread of COVID, half the state thought you were going too far, half the state didn't think you were going far enough. So you could never really find a place that made anyone happy. And once you kind of realized that, it was kind of empowering just to bring in all the facts, make sure you have a diverse table around that you're listening to. But once you've made a kind of that inclusive decision, to be confident in it and realize that you're not going to make everyone happy. And once you kind of realize that, and once my governor kind of realized that, there's this old saying, the Virginia way of getting things done, which is just kind of, I think it's just very slow incrementalism, and making sure everyone's happy with every decision. And it in my viewpoint of the world, it's kind of a BS way of looking at how government gets done. But once you realize that perhaps the Virginia way did not get things done as quickly as it needed to. I mean, we were the first state in the country to eliminate the death penalty after that. We were the first state in the country to ban no-knock warrants. We put mental health embedded, in our 911 response. We have the largest offshore wind farm anywhere in the country that's offshore at Hampton Roads. I mean, we decriminalized simple possession of marijuana, right? Like, these are things that if you had asked me prior to COVID, would I have been able to walk into the governor's office and say, "Hey, I think we can get rid of the death penalty this session"? I don't think he would have said yes, right? So an experience where our hope was challenged to kind of like make us open our eyes a little bit wider, and have a better grasp of the world around us, and then be bolder moving forward. Don't know if that helps. The other thing I would just kind of challenge all of you to think about is, and I talk about this a lot now, we do a lot with trying to help the federal workforce out, folks that are leaving the federal workforce and looking to get kind of reemployed, is we need hopeful folks to stay in government now more than ever. Because if you leave because you're kind of disgusted by what you see and the challenges, then you leave a void that gets filled by someone who is perhaps not disgusted by what they see. Perhaps they support what they see and they want to double down on it. So while it's really, really hard to kind of stay on the line right now, I admire you all for being at GW and getting your policy and administration degrees. And we need folks, whether it's in the private sector or whether it's in philanthropy or government, we need hopeful people to kind of, things do get better, but also not blowing hot smoke and recognizing that and I'll just end with this. I always hate that saying, like, it was a learning experience, right? Once I've had one learning experience, I don't need to have it again, right? It's okay to recognize sometimes that bad things happen and crappy experiences happen, and you just gotta kind of get through them, and you will get through them. But yeah, I don't need to be told that again when something goes bad at work. That was a good learning experience. I've had a lot of those. I don't, so it's all good.
I love that. Fantastic. Nish, we'll move over to you.
Great. I love both of those answers. So I think I'll say a couple of things. I work in the innovation space. Innovation is full of failure. For those of you who don't know the statistics, 8 out of 10 startups fail, and they fail for very human reasons. The founders don't get along. It was too early for the market to accept the technology. Investors weren't interested. Now, maybe they're interested in 5 years. And so supporting innovation is fundamentally requires a lot of hope and dealing with a lot of failure at the same time. And I think we've seen this in any topic you want to talk about, whether it's AI or climate tech or even web solutions. Some of you are MBAs, some of you are MPAs, depending on how you look at it, like innovation fails a lot. And you have to be hopeful because you have to know that the problem still has to be solved. And so even if you don't figure it out the first time, you still need to figure it out. When COVID was going on, if the first mRNA vaccine didn't work, we weren't going to stop. You had to have hope that the next one would have better results. And so in the innovation space, I think there's constant frustration, constant dejection. And again, for many of you who might be interested in the startup space, you start a company, you build a technology, you think you're going to save the world, and then an investor's not interested, the market's not ready, and you got to shut it down. And it's traumatic. But the reality is that that problem you're solving still has to be solved, and you still got to roll up your sleeves and get onto it the next time. And so I think, for me, a personal story on this, I think when I did my MPA at GW, I was at the U.S. Agency for International Development. And so at the beginning of 2025, when USAID was eliminated, it was very personally upsetting, along with my thought that it was a bad idea to eliminate that agency. In addition, we saw the elimination of the Inflation Reduction Act, which was the biggest legislation around climate change and addressing climate change. It was incredibly well written as well in terms of the incentives. We saw the CHIPS Act around research. We saw infrastructure spending result. And so all of this was very, very depressing, that the future vision we had for America, and again, infrastructure and chips, these aren't super partisan things, right? And yet they were eliminated. And so very, very worried about the future of innovation in America. I'm still worried, but at that point, it was really depressing. What happened is I took a trip around the world for work. And what I found is while the US may have temporarily stepped back from its responsibilities and its vision, the rest of the world hadn't. And so I was in Europe. They're committed to climate change regulations and clean energy. I was in the Middle East. They are committed to alternate economic models as oil becomes less relevant to their economies. And so they are committed to clean energy. There's solar panels all over the Saudi deserts, all over the Kuwait deserts, thinking about sustainable cities. I was in India, so much going on in India around healthcare, around climate, around education, using technology. There's only one radiologist for 100,000 people in India. So AI and remote healthcare and all these technologies are policy challenges in addition to being business opportunities, and they are investing in that. Australia, Japan, same. And so whenever I'm upset, I'm down about technology, innovation, policy, I go back to the people, and I think as we travel the world, other people are keep fighting the fight. Other people are thinking rationally and responsibly that these are problems we have to solve, even if the U.S. is no longer the leader on these topics. And they're continuously innovating to say, okay, what's next? And so I think that's where you got to think about is when your hope withers a little bit is what's the next opportunity to solve the problem? And if the people I talk to right now aren't solving the problem. Who can I talk to next? What's the next set of people that I can reach out to? And I think that perseverance and the long view is really important to keeping hope and to seeing change ultimately affected.
Feeling hopeful already, more inspired. What we're going to do for the sake of time, I feel like the question around maintaining their stamina, you all have addressed. So I'm going to leave it with the final question. In that, what advice would you give to public service leaders at all career stages? Because I can see from who's attending here today and who'll be listening to this later, who feel overwhelmed by the scale of today's global challenges. And I feel like you've already been giving a lot of wonderful advice on this, but maybe just kind of um, bottom lining it on what you would leave them with. Um, Nish, you're unmuted already and you look ready to go. I'm gonna go right with you.
Sure. So I think I'll actually mix in some of the questions you asked, Denise. I think the main advice I give to young folks who are sort of at the early stages of their career is it's really important to work in the field. And the field might mean, in the developing world, in a village, it might mean at a school in Louisiana. There's a lot of ways you can work in the field, but that field experience is super relevant to achieving change. I used to make a joke when I was in the Obama administration that everybody in Washington talks about 3D printing as the future of American manufacturing, but nobody's seen a 3D printer. And that's the potential problem we have as we talk just about policy or strategies. If you don't really know what's going on in the field, you really can't make an impact. You can't create change. And so I think for all of you, spending time in whatever field you're in, whatever interests you, AI startup, international development, that's going to be critical. And I think the other thing, as you think about your next stage of your career, is understanding what I think we're all saying, that change takes a long time. Was one of the first group working on entrepreneurship policy in the US government back during the Obama administration. It's taken us a good 20 years for that work to come to fruition, where it's a part of economic development strategy around the country. And so you can't look for quick wins. You can't assume that the next Facebook will come out just if you give some grant money to a startup in any part of the country. Like all this stuff takes time, it takes people, it takes training, and I think if you want to achieve that change, pick some topics, go deep, and then stick with it.
Fantastic. Clark, I'm going to circle around to you.
Okay, one of my least favorite phrases in government or elsewhere is "this is the way it's always been done." I agree with what Nish said. Yes, and I'm impatient. I'm probably always going to be impatient. I think there is a lot of discussion now about this, whether you call it the abundance agenda. I think folks, and Nish just mentioned he's kind of one of the original abundance agenda folks. There's been folks getting stuff done for a while, and don't get used to a pace which is destined to not get things done. Particularly depend on if you do pursue public space and at the federal level, um, stay hungry and stay disruptive in a way that you keep your job and you continue to move up, but don't settle for this notion that you can't get things done. You can. That's number one. Whenever I hire anyone, I I remind them that they're going to need to kind of have their own passion project, kind of side hustle at work. I said, even though I'm super awesome and you're going to want to see me every single day, there's going to be days where you don't want to see me and the job is not so great. And you need something that you can always fall back on. That's your special project that you're working towards. So for me, for a couple of years, we stood up. That's pretty random, right? We stood up an office of trails in Virginia. And most of the time, you get these big bike trails done. You give them to the conservation and recreation folks, and they can't get anything done because they don't have right of way. So we parked it in the Department of Transportation. We seeded it with $300 million. And one of the projects for me was this thing you can look it up called the Fall Line Trail, and it's a 44-mile bike trail that runs from Virginia State University up to Hanover County. It goes through two HBCUs, 30 schools, including VCU, three rivers. It goes through historic African American neighborhoods in Richmond, Jackson Ward. It's one of the coolest trails that you're ever going to see. It's the only trail that goes through two HBCUs in the country. And when things would drive me pretty wacky at work, I just closed the door. I would always say, rather than leave, I'm not going to, but I am going to I'm going to spend an hour or two on my side project. I'm going to spend an hour or two working on this fall line thing, which which is pretty random to a lot of my coworkers, but it gives me some inspiration. You got to have some things like that, because things will get noisy at work, no matter where you are, and you will get frustrated. But keep a passion project or two on the side. That would be one piece of advice. And two, don't settle for kind of malaise in government. You've got folks on this call who have demonstrated an ability to get things done. And I do think there's a lot more discussion about how do we do that now than there's been for a long time. You know, whether it's housing, whether it's, you mentioned broadband earlier. We talk a good game in DC about some of these things, but we don't necessarily move the needle. And we need kind of a new generation that's going to come into some of these positions and move the needle on some of these topics.
I love it. I know we are already over time, but Rosa, bring it home for us.
We are over time, so I'll be brief and just say two things. I mean, I think advice, stay nimble in what whether you, I just love that there's a business person, there is a, person at the state public, state level who's a public sector actor, and I, am in private philanthropy, but that's a sort of a representation of the nonprofit space. Stay nimble in your career. I think we need people all across, change makers all across these areas. It's not like change makers go to the nonprofit space, bureaucrats go to government, and capitalists go to business. Stay nimble. But second is because the most interesting career might cross some different forms. People come in and out. So anyway, that stay nimble and don't have one idea about like what your career should look like, or you can only operate in this kind of lane. And the other, I think, particularly in these times, is know what you believe. Know what you believe. Really listen to that. What do you believe? What are you grounded in? What is true for you? And abide by that. Abide by it. And every decision is just the next decision aligned with what you're about. So you might be in this job or that job or this job. It's not about the job. It's not about your role. You're building a career, and that career will tell a story about your life. And that life and career will tell a story about what you believed in your time here on earth. So sorry to get so global, but at the end of it, it's not about the job.
That is an absolutely perfect way to wrap up this talk today. I cannot thank you three enough. We were doing this for our students and alumni and prospective students to see this too, but honestly, I feel like this was very much for me too, as such a poignant reminder of what really matters. So I thank you all. I encourage everybody who is attending today. I had dropped in the chat information about the Executive in Residence program, about how to sign up to meet with these extraordinary executive in residence from the Trachtenberg School, our alumni. I just really thank you all today for just kind of reminding us what we needed to remember amidst all the chaos. So thank you all for joining us, and we will be in touch.
Thanks, Denise.